Welcome to Brainstoryum. I'm Tizard, award-winning dreampunk and deeply weird fantasy author, and yes, that's me and my fiction that's deeply weird. Explore and imagine with me the most unexpected story ideas using the surrealist word game of Exquisite Corpse. Find out more and join in at annatizard.com. This is a storytelling challenge unlike anything you've tried before. Hello, imaginative people. I'm Anna Tizard, and this is episode 94 of Brainstoryum. Now, in the last show, I shared some anecdotes and insights from FantasyCon, which was held in my hometown of Brighton this year, just a few weeks ago. My first literary convention, which was very exciting. As promised, I have some more insights to share with you today, some more in-depth writing stuff this time, before we move on to my listeners' amazing microfiction, 3 new rounds of Exquisite Corpse, and a new short story from yours truly, followed by writing prompts for you. Quite a lot that goes on in this show these days. Now, while most of the events at FantasyCon were panel discussions, based on various topics around fantasy and writing craft, on the Friday morning I went to a flash fiction workshop. I felt quite nervous about this because I was thinking, am I going to have to write something there and then and share it in the group? I mean, yes, I do that on this show, but with almost excessive use of the pause button. Well, the stop button, let's face it. Also, I feel like I'm still relatively new to flash fiction. Traditionally, short stories have come to me in the 3,000 to 5,000 word mark, and mostly for this show, I managed to write 1,000 words-ish. But often these are parts of something that wants to be longer. I'm in complete awe of anyone who can manage to write a story as short as 150 words, and even the 250 word limit that my listeners write in with are massively impressive to me. I'm trying to learn, but I suppose there's always going to be an element of personal preference as to what you like to write, balanced with stretching your skills, I guess. Anyway, my fears of having to read out something quickly hashed together in this workshop were thankfully unfounded, as the tutor, who happened to be an editor of Apex magazine, took us through some very short initial brainstorms for certain aspects of a story idea. For example, she encouraged us to do a brainstorm for 2 to 3 minutes on setting, or sensual details that you might explore in a particular setting, or ideas for a plot based on a simple writing prompt. 2 to 3 minutes was all we had to jot down as many ideas as possible on that one selected aspect, so we weren't story writing at this point. Now, I'm a big fan of the 20-minute writing slot, which in itself can feel quite pressured. This was something else, but I liked this idea of not yet getting into the scene writing, but using a very tight period of time to just jot down a list of possibilities without actually exploring any of them through descriptive writing or narrative. During the workshop, we didn't actually move on to a 20-minute writing session, but the tutor was still very much in favour of the 20-minute slot, because she mentioned that, and that is quite a well-known exercise to try anyway. But it was the splitting out of these list-style brainstorms that was different for me and really struck me, and it made me think differently about brainstorming practice in general. I normally try to do everything in my first main brainstorming session. That is, I try to come up with ideas and to start drafting, to describe, and to imagine events unfolding according to these ideas all at once. And it occurred to me, while trying these initial 2 to 3 minute lists of ideas, that being so strict and restricted in that first brainstorm will prevent me from potentially grabbing hold of the first decent idea that comes to me, running with that, and possibly missing out on other ideas that I might have come up with had I kept going with a list like this. By focusing just on ideas in the first instance, you can filter out the more obvious ones, the ones that are less intriguing, and reach possibilities you might not think of if you dive straight into narrative writing. So the lesson for me was, don't follow the first white rabbit you see. Consider all your options first before you jump down the hole. Interesting. Once we'd tried a few of these 2 to 3 minute brainstorms, we moved on to reviewing some really fantastic examples of microfiction. Note that with Apex Magazine, there are a lot of stories that are free to read on their website, and I will certainly be checking out some more of their microfiction and poetry online. Just got to bookmark that. But during the session, I must admit to feeling a little bit intimidated. This was clearly not the intention, and it was a really good mini course. But something happens when you appraise the first line of a 250-word story in this context with this level of critical attention to detail. Looking at how to do a lot with a little, how with just a few words you can pack in so much. It was reassuring to hear someone else, a professional editor no less, talk about a principle that I've explored a fair bit on this show, of withholding information from the reader, of keeping them guessing, of raising questions in their mind through the first couple of lines. So I got that, but in such a short space, so crystallized. It's difficult not to become self-conscious about this if you try writing something too soon after such hawk-eyed critique, picking apart almost every word of an opening line. So I left the course a little bit in awe and wondering how on earth I could ever reach the dizzy heights of literary microfiction. Maybe I should stick with longer pieces where I'm more comfortable. But then the universe intervened to prove how I'd overthought this. And in doing so, the universe was quite funny. As I was just getting back into my normal routine after FantasyCon, and a friend of mine, Harold, who listens to the show, sent me something his boss said in a Teams chat in his workplace, because what his manager said struck him as being quite odd, having a similar kind of oddness that you might get in a story that I'll read or write on the show. Now, before I read this out, it's only short, you ought to know that this was part of a conversation on Teams about a mouse in their staff kitchen. Rah. But taken on its own, this person's interjection has a touch of the short story about it. I think you'll see what I mean. She wrote, "Hi everyone, I've just seen this chat as I was about to leave a message. I was the last person to leave this evening and popped downstairs to leave my glass in the kitchen. All the lights were off. As I turned on the kitchen light and walked towards the sink, I became aware of something on my left that moved quickly behind the bin next to the fridge. I stood there for a while, but it didn't appear again. I will report this to estates. From the message above, it looks like someone else has also seen our visitor." I feel like Harold's boss has almost written a piece of microfiction by accident. If she can do it by accident, so can we, people. So can we. What is it that makes it intriguing? All it is is the way she writes about a mouse without saying it's a mouse. So all the time, a part of you is asking, is it a mouse? Or is it something else? A movement? Even if this was part of a story and it does turn out to just be a mouse, this element of mystery, the way she writes, makes you hang on just in case it might not be a mouse. The paragraph she wrote could be a starting point for a longer piece where it turns out to be an alien or some other weird creature. Our Little Visitor. It's not a bad title either. And so it was the universe showed me, the day after I returned from FantasyCon to so-called normality, that it's actually quite simple. This is one very straightforward way to hook your reader from the first couple of lines. Get them guessing. Tell them half-truths. Hint at things without giving the whole picture. Then let things develop and unfold from there. I know this. You know this. We know how to do this. So let's let loose and have some fun with writing flash fiction. And thank you, Harold. You saved me from my own overthinking. But first, I have some incredible short fiction to share with you, my talented listeners' responses to a word combination that cropped up in the last show, the silver-eyed scrutiny. Alessandro Bozzo wrote, "As I stood under the silver-eyed scrutiny of the moon, sipping the clear, refreshing water from that tranquil lake, I couldn't help but reflect on what I had done. I licked away some of the blood from my fur, trying to hide my true nature from the piercing moonlight that illuminated me for all the heavens to pass judgment on. What did they expect? I was a wolf, the first alpha, the pack leader. I had an obligation to feed my family. That deer was just a victim of circumstance, in the wrong place at the wrong time. I had no real quarrel with it. I leaned towards the water to take another sip. The silvery reflection of the moon stared mockingly back at me. I rippled the water in defiance with my giant paw. The distorted reflection appeared to be laughing at me. I turned my head towards the stars and let out a roaring howl. The moon trembled as the clouds and fog rushed in to protect her from me. For I am the wolf god, Canis lupus, and I shun your silver-eyed scrutiny. From this day forth, all my children will howl wildly at you in defiance, and no mist will ever provide you any quarter." Wow, interesting idea of how the moon is the silver-eyed scrutiny, and the way you've written it also transforms the weather and other natural phenomena like the clouds into, well, they're kind of like characters as well. Thank you, Alessandro. And if you'd like to check out Alessandro's children's fiction, go to abozproductions.com. Paul Macmillan wrote, "The rain hadn't stopped for 2 days, and the city smelled like mildew and confession. I stood over what was left of Professor Mallory, who was sprawled across his office floor like a cautionary tale. His blood had dried like a dull wine stain on the carpet, and a dozen knife wounds were carved into his chest like punctuation. Someone had a lot to say. They called me in because I see things others don't. Silver eyes, they whisper, like I bought them from the devil in exchange for knowing when someone's lying. Truth is, I just listen better than most and notice what others miss. Mallory taught literature, which means half the town had heard him talk about love and the other half had been dumb enough to believe him. Rumour around town was he'd been sleeping with one of his students. Some said her husband didn't take kindly to footnotes written in his own bed. I found a lipstick-stained coffee mug on the desk, the same shade as the blood on the floor. It wasn't proof, but close enough to start asking questions. Outside, the rain turned meaner, and I couldn't help but think that every story needs an ending, but around here they usually bleed out before the last line's written. This is a fantastic example of how a first-person narrative can really enrich a story and add a flavour to it and draw you in to the protagonist's voice, and with that menacing last line as well, lingering. Thank you, Paul. You can find Paul Macmillan on X as Bookmarks, Love and Law. Paul Monteith wrote Silver Eye Scrutiny. It wasn't me, the Mad Hatter declared. Nor me, the Mad March Hare added. Then who put Dor in the teapot? Alice asked. The demented Dodo and the crazy Cheshire Cat busied themselves eating sandwiches and cake to avoid questions about Dor's confinement in the teapot, which was very upset. I'm for the brewing of tea, not the stewing of a dormouse. There, Alice said as she gently patted the pot, attempting to console it. It must be very distressing for you and Dor. There were muffled sounds from inside the teapot as Dor tried to tell the guests just how distressing her situation was. Dodo suggested they call for Waxwing. Waxwing? Teapot asked. Waxwing is a silver-eyed bird, Dodo explained. According to native law, the bird possesses an ability to see beyond the surface. If anyone can tell us who put Dor in the teapot, the silver-eyed scrutiny of Waxwing will. The culprits behind Dor's potting, Hatter and Hare, were relieved to hear that all the guests at the tea party had never seen Waxwing in Wonderland. If not seen, Alice said, he must be unseen, and that means we should not look for him. Hatter nodded in agreement, though he wasn't sure why, not only that not looking for silver-eyed scrutiny was in his and Hare's favour. But their relief was short-lived when an olive-green bird landed on Dor's rear end, protruding from the teapot. Hello, the bird said. I'm Waxwing. I hear you're not looking for me. Wow, this really captures the quintessential Alice in Wonderland whimsy, mixed with philosophical undertones and the weird contradictions that make you question the logic within language itself. Very, very Alice in Wonderland. Thank you, Paul. You can find Paul Monteith on Blue Sky as Quantum Fairy. Eric Montgomery responded to 2 writing prompts on the show. Firstly, the Silver-Eyed Scrutiny inspired this, entitled Of Being Measured. He came for bread and a little quiet. The store near closing was usually good for that. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, steady and harmless. A few late shoppers drifted past him, gathering last-minute dinners or breakfast for the morning ahead. He walked the perimeter first, the way he always did. Habit more than reason. Something felt different tonight. He couldn't place it. Maybe the air was cooler. Maybe the music had shifted. Or maybe it was the sense of being measured. The faint tug along the spine when someone watches without meaning to. He told himself not to be dramatic, just tired and hungry. He cut through the canned goods aisle, then the snacks, noticing how his reflection kept appearing in odd places, stretched across curved corners of polished metal he didn't remember noticing before, catching him at strange angles, making him look uncertain even when he wasn't. He reached the bread at last, rows of soft loaves waiting on their shelves, nothing unusual about them. As he reached for one, something above him caught the light, a small gleam. He looked up. A round mirror sat high in the ceiling's lattices of pipes, its surface calm and metallic. A single silver circle gazed down, holding a warped version of him inside it. Another further down the aisle. Another near the register. All quiet, all patient. He took the loaf and headed for the exit, the weight of those cool silver glints following him until the doors slid open and let him back into the unobserved dark. This one is really interesting because you've got this feeling of the unknown, the unexplained, following this guy, and it's all running alongside the underside of what seems to be a really ordinary setting. Just a shop. Is there something magical going on or not? The second writing prompt Eric responded to is based on the short story. Well, it was more of a partial story that I wrote in the last show. 2 scenes which featured a lizard man using magic to disguise himself as a human, particularly through speech and communication, tricking people into believing that he was speaking English so that he could prey on young women. I asked if anyone could write another scene that either includes the story I began in episode 93 or reimagines it, taking it in a different direction. And so Eric wrote, milk, spinach, shampoo, gum. He found the paper curled against a bus stop bench, the ink smudged but legible. Humans listed objects in an order that must mean something. Milk, spinach, shampoo, gum. A sequence, a pattern, a guide. He read it until the edges thinned in his grasp. If he memorised the pattern, he could sound human. He waited until someone approached, a woman balancing her grocery bag and glancing at her phone. Perfect. He stepped forward with what he hoped passed for ease. Milk, he said, tone steady. She slowed but didn't stop. Excuse me? Spinach, he added, smiling too wide. Her hand moved towards her coat pocket. He did not recognise the gesture, and that confusion sent nerves skittering through him. Before he could stifle it, his tongue flicked out, tasting the tang of cold air off her skin. She yanked a small device free. A sharp crack filled the space as blue arcs jumped between the prongs. He flinched. Shampoo, he blurted. Back up, right now. He tasted ozone. Another involuntary flick. Her eyes widened and the device snapped again, a warning held at arm's length. He froze, trapped between the script he trusted and a human who refused to follow it. Gum, he whispered, as if the final word could repair whatever had gone wrong. She retreated fast, crossing the street without a backward glance. He stood in the dark with the receipt crushed in his fist, tasting the sharp sting of failure on the cooling night. I love how this really shows how the lizard man feels through his actions and speech, though it's more like what he doesn't say or can't say that implies to us what's really going on with him emotionally. This is a far more humane treatment of the lizard man, which stirs our sympathy for him this time. So quite a different flavour and a different direction from the parts that I'd written. Thank you, Eric, for both pieces. Amazing. And you can find more of Eric Montgomery's stories and poetry at madpoet.org. But bear in mind the O and the E in poet are swapped out for 0 and 3. That's madpoet.org, but with 03 in the word poet. Thank you to everyone who sent in a story for today's show. They were just brilliant. And, might I add, each of them began with that element of mystery to hook us in and get us guessing from the very start. So well done, people. You are there. Right, now it is time to reach for new possibilities, both ridiculous and dark, in the socks of destiny. That's right, Exquisite Corpse mixes words and phrases into a single sentence that goes describing word noun, action, describing word noun. I'll play 3 rounds to create 3 very weird sentences, doing some brainstorming along the way for possible ideas. And then I'll be using the pause button a lot to hopefully draft either a short story or a scene, something like that, based on one of them. But I'll also, as usual, be looking for some interesting word combinations that may make standalone writing prompts for your microfiction or poetry, should you wish to be in the next Brainstorming. So the first word from the describing word sock is from, if I can open it up, KT, protective. Okay, so someone or something that is protective. Our noun from the noun sock is from Paul Monteith. Turkey baster. Okay, this is very specific. It feels very literal. I'm not going to judge this Exquisite Corpse. I'm just going to keep going. Oh gosh, are we that time of year already? Right, from the action sock, I have from Anonymous, left. So, oh, interesting. So a protective personality or turkey baster has actually abandoned someone. A little bit of contradiction going there. And contradictions are rather interesting in this game. Next word is from, if I can detach it from my hand, Mariah, dusty. Okay, this is rather strange. Let's try for one last word and then we'll read the complete debacle that is the first Exquisite Corpse. This is from Paul Macmillan. Fallen Night. Oh, interesting. So the entire the entire Exquisite Corpse, which yes is bonkers, but this is how it begins, people. The protective turkey baster left the dusty fallen night. I would have said, if you gave that to me on its own, I would have said this is a knight who has obviously been killed in battle or fallen off his horse or fallen in some other moral or honourable sense. But then putting the word dusty in front of it makes me think this is a game of chess, an abandoned game of chess, or a figurine from a tabletop game. And then looking at the slightly more ridiculous word combination at the beginning, the protective can't even say it. The protective turkey baster. But then, hang on a minute. Isn't a turkey baster always, in a roundabout way, protective in that, yes, you're helping to crispy up the turkey. As someone who doesn't eat turkey, I think I'm right in saying this. But in a way, you're protecting the turkey from drying out. Okay? So all turkey basters are protective. But then trying to think outside the box, which is what we try and do to get to a potential story idea. What if we have a turkey baster that actually stops a turkey from being cooked at all? A kind of protective shield is spread over this turkey so that it can escape. This feels like some kind of cartoon caper, or maybe an episode of Wallace and Gromit. This is really, that this whole Exquisite Corpse is getting me into the Christmas mood. But putting them together, this dusty fallen knight who is somehow abandoned by a turkey baster, it feels like a box of Christmas stuff, you know. But all the bits and pieces inside are planning their escape this year. Except that the turkey baster who manages to escape abandons the other things in the box, including a fallen knight. Not really sure if I'm convinced by any of these word combinations, but I think it's time just to move on. You never know, something might pop up. I'm just going to move on to the next Exquisite Corpse. So, we have a describing word from Paul Macmillan. Brooding. Right. Who or what was brooding? This is from Paul Thomas. Zombie. Okay, so now we're moving backwards into a Halloween mood. A brooding zombie. The action is from Titania Tempest, who uses the hashtag VSS Magic on Blue Sky. Oh, indelicately invoked. Ah, bit of magic going on, although that's kind of unusual coming from a zombie. They're usually depicted as having lost their humanity and ability to think or care. Next word is from Paul Benfield. Hot. Take that as you will. I'm going to move on swiftly to the final word and see how this fits together, if at all. This is from Mostly Paul, who is Quantum Fairy on Blue Sky. Butter spreader. Okay, something's going on here. Is everyone feeling hungry? Is the colder weather making you feel like you've got to talk about kitchen utensils? But hey, we've got what we've got. Let's try and see if we've got something here that is worthy of a story. So all together, and I think my green tea is brewed by now, so this is a good moment, but I'll read it all out. Our second Exquisite Corpse is the brooding zombie, indelicately invoked, the hot butter spreader. Right. Yes, I think it's time for some green tea. Okay, let's give that a stir. Right. Okay, so the brooding zombie, indelicately invoked, the hot butter spreader. Actually, that's quite funny because a butter spreader, even if it's just a knife, a butter knife, will always work better if it's hot. Heat it up, it will cut straight through. Brooding. Now, brooding zombie, that is an interesting combination. Brooding can mean, I suppose, dark or menacing, but the first meaning that springs to my mind is someone thinking deeply about something, which is very unzombie-like. Or someone who's in the mood for having babies. It makes me think of hens. Although actually that's more broody, isn't it? But again, all extremely un-zombie-like qualities. So could this be a character who's been labelled a zombie or is zombie-like in some way in the perceptions of other people, but actually they're very deep thinking? Or, I suppose, dark and menacing. Well, that is potentially a bit zombie, but I always think they're very mindless creatures. And moving on to the word invoked. I mean, I'm not sure what I would do with indelicately invoked. That's more of a detail that you'd perhaps work on once you've decided what on earth is going on with the word invoked. It makes me think of incantations or charms, to invoke a deity or spirit, so calling upon someone for help. It could also mean invoking a law or some legislation to help support your argument for something in court? That feels like a very different direction to take this. Zombies in court, arguing for their rights. But then to invoke a hot butter spreader, I mean, you'd have to turn that into a character. So the spirit of a baker, someone who works in a sandwich shop or in the kitchens of a restaurant, why would a zombie invoke them? That would be a good question for a 2 to 3 minute brainstorm like I was talking about in the introduction. In fact, I think if I pick this one, that's what I would do initially, but it would have to be based on the character. First, you have to decide who is this zombie, this brooding zombie, what makes them brooding, and the reason that they are like that, or their backstory, about the essence of who they are. That would surely lead you to possibilities as to why they would try to invoke someone who works in a bakery. Something to think about. I'm not gonna do it now because I'm sure you don't want to hear me scribbling for 3 minutes, but and umming and ahhing. But I'm just going to move swiftly on to the third exquisite corpse for now. Our first word is from Paul Thomas. Blank-faced. Okay, so the next word is from Meg. Welcome to the game, Meg. Origami. Oh, now that's weird. Blank-faced origami. Does origami ever have a face that could have an expression? Our action is also from Meg. It's all coming out the socks now. Hid in the garden from. Okay, so our final describing word is from Paul Thomas again. Disgorging. Ooh. Oh, that's more of an action. It sounds quite violent. Final word. Who or what was disgorging? This is from Paul Macmillan. Raven. Oh gosh, yes, that does seem quite violent. So the entire exquisite corpse is the blank-faced origami. Ooh. Hid in the garden from the disgorging raven. Right, so disgorging means to pour out, like vomiting potentially, or to cause to pour out. It feels like the raven is maybe killing and eating a small animal, like a mouse or another bird. Disgorging can also mean to yield or give up something, usually when it's been dishonestly gained. But because it's a raven, I'm thinking more literally and more bloodily. But the blank-faced origami fascinates me as a word combination. That's so odd. Could it be an origami expert or someone who is made of paper? You could go very weird with this. You could do a brainstorm just on this and just see where it takes you. And why is this character hiding from the raven? Although the raven has proved itself to be dangerous through disgorging something. But then surely someone made of paper, or just a person who's good at making paper art, isn't in particular danger from a raven, unless there is something different or magical about this raven, or if it's a person who's known as the raven for their dark and menacing deeds. There's a few things going on here that I think once you start poking into them with your pen, that may bring something out. I think what I am going to do is I will try out the method I was talking about in the introduction and do a separate sort of list style brainstorm for about 2 to 3 minutes, just to go through general possibilities before I get started on a 20-minute writing slot where I just draft and just keep pushing and pushing for ideas. So split it into the 2 parts. I am going to try being more strict with my time slots in this way and see if that forces my imagination to come up with more things or better material. Or, you never know, I might just find it too restrictive and find the brainstorms blurring into one. But you've got to try these things, we're always learning, and we never really learn anything new if we don't try something new. Okay, wish me luck. The Immortal Sandwich. The town clock chimed. From the back of the shop, Ella counted the bongs, silently moving her lips under her bowed head. 12? The lunchtime queues will be gathering across the square, a bustle of hungry people eager to form a line. Except that it wasn't 12 noon. It was midnight. Rows of jam jars glimmered faintly in a shaft of streetlight from the town square. Pickled onions floated as if they might swivel like eyes upon the almost empty kitchen. Laid out over the broad worktop, knives glittered as if poised for an operation. No one knew the exactness required by this operation better than Ella. Working in a sandwich shop took speed, precision, a muscle memory for where each ingredient was kept, so she could move and grab and cut and spread in an almost continuous motion. No time to take a breath or check the clock. It was true to say she hadn't taken a breath in a while. Her stony figure sat on a stool, rigid as a lamppost. A stillness, not quite sleeping. What was the point of going home to bed? Her cat bristled and hissed whenever she arrived, and wouldn't touch her food until Ella had left. Her fridge was filled with things that held no temptation for her anymore. Time passed, mould grew, bluing the edges of her loaf, the half-finished jar of sauce, the vegetables, carrots sagging like giant hairy fingers splayed on the glass shelf. Time gnawed at the living. A frown creased Ella's forehead, a statue remembering to think. Time. What had happened to time? But hadn't this been her dream? To have endless time to build up the business, to do courses, to learn, perhaps even run courses herself, to start a pub. She sprang up so fast, a pile of napkins fluttered off the counter. In the dull light, they scattered like paper birds and nosedived into the tiled floor. Ella grabbed the butter spreader from the table, held it aloft like a tiny silver blade, and cried, "Drake!" Nothing. A beat passed, then another. In the distance, a fox shrieked, answered by a dog's nervous barking. A squeak of a window above a shop as someone yelled, "Shut up!" into the night. Ella exhaled a breath she didn't need to take and sidled to the window. A pool of moonlight lit the cracks in the pavement, except, no it didn't. It was just another streetlight. How come nothing was ever as it seemed? Shoulders sagging, she turned and shuddered at the sight of Drake standing there next to the worktop in his pristine black suit. "You rang?" he said, droll as ever. Wincing, he waggled a finger in his ear as if to dislodge the echo of that awful shout she'd made. "Yes, I did." Ella straightened up, gathering her courage. "I called you because I don't understand." Drake raised his eyebrows, pouting at the floor where the napkins lay in a tangled heap. How could he behave so much like a 19th century footman, still, after all these centuries? "Yes," Ella persisted, despite his silence. "I need to understand why. Why did you do this to me?" Drake's forehead wrinkled as his eyebrows shot up even further. "Why I gave you eternal life? Why I endowed upon you the most precious gift after you begged and pleaded? After you beleaguered me with such tales of woe and endless frustration, that there was never enough time to do anything, to get where you wanted to go, or some such phrasing I can't quite recall." He shook his head at the corner of the worktop, as if the impertinence of Ella's entire character rested on that single protrusion of scrubbed marble. "I mean," Ella blinked and tried again, lowering her voice this time. "I mean, why did you do it from your point of view? What was in it for you? And why didn't you tell me it would be like this? No sense of time, all feelings of purpose, gone, lost in the endless stream of work without play, rest without sleep. Life without death?" Drake added, his lips pinching the end of his question. Ella took a step closer, her features softening. "Why turn a humble sandwich maker into an immortal when you could have chosen a doctor, a surgeon, a scientist trying to cure cancer?" As her voice rose in frustration, the butter spreader held aloft, Drake pushed aside the steel implement with a firm finger and an expression of distaste. "Because, my dear, I really, really like sandwiches. Now shut up and make me a BLT. And that is why the brooding zombie indelicately invoked the hot butter spreader. Or I should say, invoked with the butter spreader the person who had changed her into a sort of zombie. At least an immortal who has lost her zest for life, if she can be said to still be living. Now, I'll tell you what I did, because I did use a different method this time based on what I'd learned from the flash fiction workshop at FantasyCon. I sat down to brainstorm all the possible story ideas I could come up with in 2 to 3 minutes, except that I took 10 minutes in the end. But the fact is, these exquisite corpses are real puzzles, most of them. So I'm not just doing a brainstorm on, say, an object like a mug or a pair of shoes, or how a relationship between a mother and daughter might go wrong, or the word poison. I was working with an entire sentence that didn't make much sense on its own, and which contains several different elements that I'm trying to draw together. That's my excuse, and I'm sticking to it. But seriously, I think it's always going to be the case that different methods are going to work for different people and different stories. And the fact is, I did find this really helpful to try because it was new to me. This idea of not even attempting to write any scene in that first brainstorm, just to focus on getting down all the different possibilities I could imagine in a list. So by the end of it, I had a wider selection to choose from than if I'd used that brainstorming session in my normal way, which is to do both, to begin writing in earnest as well. One thing I did focus in on in particular was the protagonist's character and her personal reasons for having become an immortal, whether intentionally or not, and her reasons for being unhappy about it. I think even in a short space like this, it makes all the difference to work out the central character's motivation. Like I've said many times before, the heart of a story beats with a reason why. After this 10-minute brainstorm, I let it rest for at least a day. I didn't come back to my notes until I had another dedicated writing slot. Then I attempted a 20-minute writing session, but it turned out to be 30 minutes. Whatever. The results of that second writing slot were rather scrappy scene writing and more notes, very patchy, but even so, I'd worked out what the beginning and the end of the scene would be and firmed up my decision about who Ella was, how and why she came to be in this position, and what her conflict was. Finally, a couple of days after that, I returned to my scrappy scene and pulled it all together. And this was the main writing slot for me. While I was starting off with a low word count from last time, I found I could immediately pick up the atmosphere and tone of the piece, and both the characters had had time to sort of clarify themselves in my mind's eye. So yes, this was the third sitting, but by now it was much easier because the story felt ready to flow. I had all those elements in place. I just needed to pull them together. I will definitely be using this method again, even if I can't stick to the 2-3 minutes rule necessarily. Now, what can I tempt you with this time for a short story or poem, or just a story description for an idea you have? Of course, you may pick any word combination from today's Exquisite Corpses, that's entirely up to you, but I'd like to suggest the blank-faced origami, which could be interpreted as the blank-faced origami expert. So tell me what you'd make of that. You know what to do. Maximum word count of 250 words. Go to annatizard.com, hit the contact button on any page footer, and make sure you get it to me by the Friday following the release of this show, so I have time to include it in my recording. Until next time, go forth and be inspired. I hope you enjoyed today's Brainstoryum. You can find out more about Exquisite Corpse and my series, The Book of Exquisite Corpse, at annatizard.com. Subscribe to my e-newsletter and you'll get volume 1 for free. And while you're there, why not submit a few words to the Socks of Destiny on my play page? You may inspire me or inspire yourself to write a unique new story. See you next time.